Siobhon McManus had no intentions of returning home after graduating from Northwestern University in Chicago. But more than a year ago, home was calling, and the Southern girl with Chamorro and Palauan roots knew where she needed to be. Today, Siobhon is just 22 with the wisdom of someone decades ahead of her. She chronicles life through storytelling, finally achieving her secret aspiration of being a writer. Her work, however, is beyond personal self-expression. It's her way of documenting the Micronesian experience and honoring those who have come before her.
Growing up around storytellers, that's what we spend our weekends doing, especially during like a typhoon when the power is out and you have nothing better to do than make each other laugh and tell stories, talk story. Growing up in a family that is so good at that, both my Palauan side and my Chamorro side, I think I've always wanted to do that, and I fell in love with the written word just by extension of being surrounded by people who were so good at it.
In school, there was minimal opportunity to see stories that reflected her life, but looking back, she sees pioneers like her Uncle Valentine Sengabao and his book Microchild, and a few local emerging writers who were paving the way. And more inspiration was closer than she thought. At 16, Siobhon became her grandmother's caretaker. She describes her experience in the poem Hale, meaning roots.
She tells stories of a time I can't remember and a language I can't speak. And though I spend Nana's last days sleeping by her bedside, I am haunted by this self-inflicted distance. I want to tell her, don't leave yet. I'm not ready. Your graduation and mine is premature. I wasn't expecting this kind of test. I want to hold her hand and her sprawling veins carrying the blood that calls me home, like roots grounding my past. Like rivers flowing toward my future, Nana's holy hands. Weave your history into mine, like fishtail braids and beads-up baskets. Teach my hands how to give, how to create, how to start again, how to tell your stories to the ones who will sit in front of me searching for you.
Towards the end of her life, when I was one of her main caretakers, when everyone would be gone, she would speak in Chamorro, and I wouldn't know how to respond to her. And writing about that process reminded me that there's such a wealth of stories in that generation that I can't access because I haven't taken it upon myself to learn my language. So my responsibility and my love for not just my family, but for my people, in wanting to tell their stories, I learned that I have to take ownership of that language.
Siobhon enrolled herself into the Harao Immersion School, where she was encouraged to use what she knew to build her work.
It was the same thing. I spent 6 months with my Palauan grandma being her caretaker. And I had to remember a lot of those Palauan sayings real quickly because after she had her stroke and when I would be taking care of her, she would revert to speaking Palauan. And so it kind of clicked in these past 6 years of going to school, caretaking for both my grandmas, coming back, being a teacher. All of those events kind of just reaffirmed this importance of living my language, recounting the stories of my matriarchs, and doing right by that heritage by using my voice to talk about my experiences as a Micronesian woman and my experiences as someone who values this community and wants to hear my students and my peers tell their stories, especially when you think of how many strong leaders we have in that generation that's slowly passing, the post-World War II generation. And you think about how every year we have less and less Indigenous Native speakers. For me, that's been the biggest, most humbling motivator, is that at the end of the day, I'm not just writing for myself, I'm writing with the knowledge that I have a community whose stories deserve to be told.
The poem Hale is one of 2 poems published in the anthology Ikinalemtin Gi Pacifico, produced by a writing group that launched its first book this month. It's where Siobhon carried on the storytelling tradition that's helped mold her to the English teacher she is today.
To Tugi Motna and what they're doing as a writing community, again, I see all of these writers and the editors as Pacific you know, they're pioneers in Pacific writing, and there are navigators. And for me, I wouldn't be able to write or participate in this community or have the dream of publishing if I didn't have a bunch of men and women who have gone before us and are kind of encouraging my generation to tell our stories. And so I'm certainly encouraged and continually humbled to be back home, and just to know that there are plenty of people who have been doing this work for a very long time.
And for those who find themselves caring for their loved ones, Siobhon holds lots of respect.
When we think of cultural perpetuation, we might not think of caregiving, or we might not think of that process of coming home and really dedicating your time and your entire life. I feel like I've learned more through the process of taking care of my Chamorro grandma and my Palauan grandma, what it means just as a Micronesian to honor those people who planted your roots. That culture of reciprocity you can't really understand what that word means. I feel like you can't understand what true Inafat Malik really means until you give up your resources to truly sacrifice on behalf of like these people who made those sacrifices for you in the first place. And so that give and take of like mutual giving and mutual sacrifice. Caretaking is definitely one of the most like emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting tasks I think anyone can undertake. So shout out people who do that full time, because it's hard. But I think it's also one of the most priceless experiences.